Okay, could you confirm if you can see the screen clearly and I'm audible? You can unmute yourself and confirm.
यस यस आवाज आ रहा है।
Okay, great. ठीक है. Okay, let's start. So, welcome to this SPW online workshop. And today we are going to complete our workshop on basic photography. So it will be camera settings and composition techniques. One of the composition techniques I have for today's schedule. And welcome again. I will be the presenter, Sumit Dhuper. Okay, just give you a brief introduction of myself. My name is Sumit Dhuper. I am portrait, food, and still life product photographer. I like to do a lot of artistic style photography. So whenever you see my work, you will find it some artistic touches there in all the genres. So whatever the photography I'm doing, so I want to show my subject in artistic way. The beauty of the subject should be showing in artistic way. That's my aim always, and I like to create. I love to do different perspectives. So find some new creative ways to see the same subject in a creative manner. So that's my specialty. And I live in Pune city. I'm in Maharashtra, so India. I've started all these my photography workshop expeditions in Feb 2019. So since then, I'm just continuing. And because of COVID, I initiated the SPW online stream. So I'm doing all the online courses under SPW online workshop. So you can find on my website all the information about it. I'm offering all the services through my website, sumitphotoworld.com. You can visit my portfolio. I can see that what kind of work I'm doing, and you can always reach me on the email address. So SPW Expedition is my venture where I'm doing all these photography workshop and courses. I also have Sumit Photo World YouTube channel. You can check my channel. You'll find something useful there or do. SPW Photograph, SPW Fine Art. So these are my ventures. I'm working on the back end. Fine Art, for Fine Art, I have my dedicated section in the website. You can find my some selected for images. You can see the creations. You can buy if you want. So everything is there on my website. On the social media, you can search me with the handle Sumit Photo World. So anywhere you will find Sumit Photo World, and it will be myself only. So let me just give you a brief introduction on my YouTube channel. So it is Sumit Photo World. You can search on the YouTube. I have 3 playlists: SPW Launch, SPW Expedition, and BTS. So behind the scenes. So this is my playlist where I'm including all the behind the scenes, whatever new project assignment I'm doing. I try to complete behind the scene there. SPW Expedition, I'm including all the recorded session image gallery there. Even the basic introduction photography workshop, whatever I've done in the past, I've recorded, I published there. You can refer, because all the workshops, I do not prepare any script thing. So you'll find the content a little different in all the sessions, including today. So SPW Launch, I have this playlist where I'm putting all the post-processing editing workflow in different kind of photography, how I use my editing skills. So you can see there. And if you want me to create any special video which will be helpful for you, you can give me feedback, you can suggest, and I'll definitely work on that to create a new video. This is scheduled for today's workshop. It will be 60-minute session, and we'll be having Q&A session at the end. So all participants allowed. These are just simple rules. You can ask questions in the middle, but make sure the question is around the topic, what we are discussing on the screen. And participants allowed for video and audio. So you can turn on video if you want, but it's up to you. It's all your interest. So you can turn it on. Keep add your questions in the chat box. If you just add your question in the chat box, we'll discuss in the Q&A session. So we'll be having that only the Q&A session for the questions. Anything around the photography we'll discuss in detail. Okay, let's start. So first topic is how DSLR camera works. So you can see two diagrams, two photos of the DSLR components you can see on the screen. Image on the left side is the DSLR when we are not shooting, where we are just viewing through the viewfinder. And you can see the components inside. There are a lot of components: lens, reflex mirror, matte focusing screen, pentaprism, eyepiece, focal plane shutter, sensor, and the light. So how light travels? We can see through the diagram, when light enters through the lenses, it reaches the reflex mirror. So reflex mirror, it will be always on 45-degree angle. So because it's allowing or it's converting horizontal line into vertical, so it can reach through the pentaprism section. So pentaprism section is designed just to make sure the when light reaching on the pentaprism, it's converting vertical line into horizontal, so it can pass through the viewfinder. That's how we see the frame through the viewfinder. And you can see there is a blue straight line. So the blue line is a shutter plane. So it's when we press shutter release button, it's open up. And you can see the strip line red at the back. It's a sensor where image getting recorded. So at the moment of shooting, if you see a reflex mirror just going up, so it's always on 45-degree angle, but when we press shutter release button, to complete the exposure, it will open up, it will go into the 90-degree position, and shutter plane, you can see it's open. It's allowing light to reach the sensor directly. So the longer the time the shutter release, shutter plane keep open, remain open, it'll allow the exposure getting recorded on the sensor. That's how a image getting recorded on the sensor. So you can all the whatever the described here in the text, it's the same what I've explained you. So anytime you can refer these slides in the recorded session, you can read it through. How mirrorless camera works. So we'll just try to understand that how it's different between compared to the DSLR, because nowadays we are talking about mirrorless camera. So it's better to have some understanding of the basic components, the why it's making a huge noise in the market. Let's see the diagram here. So if you see the diagram for the mirrorless camera, it's having lesser components compared to DSLRs. So what we have in the mirrorless camera? We have lens, we have shutter plane is there, we have sensor, image sensor is there, and this is a new member on the 9th number. It's an electronic viewfinder. So this is the key difference, or the key, we can say the major improvement in the mirrorless camera. It's additional, so that's why the mirrorless camera is unique on its own in the mechanism. So mirrorless system is more simpler than the DSLR. Here the sensor is directly exposed to the light. This generates a live preview of the scene directly to the electronic viewfinder. So whatever you see through the viewfinder, it's going to capture, it's going to create the same frame. So when you press a shutter release button, it'll just open the shutter plane like in the DSLR mechanism. So it just allow the light to reach the sensor and complete the capture. So whatever you see on the screen through the viewfinder and the mirrorless camera, you'll get the same quality of the work there, the same exposure you will see. So benefits of mirrorless camera. We'll just try to understand the key benefits of mirrorless camera. It's more compact because it's having a small sensor. So camera, small sensor means it needs a small body to host that sensor, making the mirrorless camera easier to carry. Like a point and shoot camera, it's quite easy to carry mirrorless camera compared to DSLR. Electronic viewfinder, EVF, final image preview appears directly onto the screen, onto the image sensor, offering a live view, which then displays on the rear LCD screen. This image preview allows you to adjust the settings like exposure, brightness, saturation, and contrast before taking your shot. So before you even complete the exposure, you'll click the shutter release button. You can just see that how the exposure will be. You can adjust all these settings: exposure, brightness, saturations, contrast, everything you can adjust there. And after completing shot, you'll see the same quality of work you are getting. Image stabilization. With lightweight, the camera is less prone to shaking, so image quality is sharp and clear. So it's really, we can say that advantage when you're carrying a lightweight body of the camera, you'll be having more control on the device while doing handheld photography. So image quality will be definitely improved. Silent mechanism, fewer moving parts inside the camera also means less noise. So when we have less components inside the body, you will see that it's making less noise. If you have experienced DSLR, you can experience mirrorless camera, and you'll find a lot of difference in terms of noise inside the device. Higher shooting speed. So with better focusing capabilities for contrast detection and high shutter speeds, mirrorless models makes it easier for photographers to capture a faster rate. So it's a combination of both. That it's a mechanism that contrast detection with high shutter speed. It's very easy, and it's really improved the burst mode, the shutter, the capability of capturing the images in burst. It's really improved in mirrorless camera. Now we'll understand the key differences in both the devices. So because if we understand the key differences, we'll be able to take a decision that if we really want to go for mirrorless camera or not. Mirrorless cameras are more lightweight. So that's advantage with the mirrorless camera. Mirrorless cameras offer real-time previews of exposure and contrast. So anytime if you have a device which giving you real-time preview of the images which you are going to capture, it's always advantage. So that's a benefit of mirrorless camera. Mirrorless cameras have shorter battery life due to EVF. So this is very critical. So if you are carrying mirrorless camera, so you must have a backup battery always with you. When you are going to spend a whole day with the camera on the field, you must have an extra backup battery. So that's the benefit of, we can say, the DSLR with the compared to mirrorless camera. They have good battery lifetime, or you can say that it's consuming lesser battery compared to mirrorless camera. You can survive. I have Nikon D750, and most of the time I complete my workshop with a single battery. So very rarely I've taken out my second battery out. So I carry backup battery just for a we can say the option where I'm doing a lot of long exposure. So I feel that I can lose a battery. So I always carry one backup, but still I never used, very rarely used. Mirrorless cameras are costly, and budget DSLR will offer the entry-level photographer more value than a budget mirrorless camera. So again, if you are new to photography, you are looking to buy a DSLR, and you are getting really confused that if you go for mirrorless camera or not. So it depends on the budget. If you are going for a budget mirrorless camera, I advise you to go for a budget DSLR, because it will give you a lot of we can say that features which will not be available in a mirrorless budget device. So budget DSLR is really we can say that advantage for you compared to budget DSLR, budget mirrorless camera, which will be having lesser features compared to a DSLR. So that's advantage with the DSLR. Mirrorless cameras offer fewer accessories. They are still lacking in their selection of attachments and lens mounts. So they are still developing. DSLRs, it's a really developed technology, and they have a lot of options from different third-party companies. Have options to provide their, we can say, the accessories for different manufacturers of DSLRs. Mirrorless cameras shoot faster, particularly when it comes to continuous shooting a burst of images. So you understand the burst of images? You understand this concept? What is burst of images? Anyone can speak. Okay, let me explain. A burst of images is a feature in a DSLR camera where you just hold the shutter release button for amount of time, and it will capture burst of images. So in Nikon, it's a 10 images. If you hold the shutter release button for some time, it'll keep capture the images until it reaches the count. You can change the burst of images count. You can set it in the DSLR. In Canon, it's a 6. The number of 6 photos it will capture in the burst mode, and it's a really improved in mirrorless camera because of the new technology. Probability of getting detailed or the sharp images really enhanced in mirrorless camera. Just for example, if you are using a DSLR, you can get 10 photos in the burst mode, and out of 10 it will be 6 or 7 images you will see that coming in good detail. Sharpness will be there. But if you are using mirrorless camera, the probability will increase, and it will be around 8 and 9 images out of 10 you will see coming in good quality. That's the difference we have in mirrorless camera. So it's an advantage when someone having mirrorless camera. Mirrorless cameras offers more image stabilization. So lack of a mirror mechanism means mirrorless cameras offer more image stabilization and less shaky photos. So if you have a lightweight camera body, it's always advantage because you can carry it for a longer time on hand. And handheld photography really demands a lot of control on the device. So you have to have very stable, we can say stability. We'll have in the coming slide, we'll understand how we can hold the device with more stability. But again, if the body camera body is lightweight, so it's advantage, and you can definitely get better image quality when you have less we can say that shaky hands, or you are more stable with the device handheld. Mirrorless cameras have a smaller sensor size than the DSLR. So this is really critical point. The difference, it's huge because this makes them less ideal for low light. So if you're mirrorless camera you may struggle with the low light condition, but in the DSLR having bigger camera image sensor, so it is a kind of advantage for the DSLR. They can manage in the low light situation compared to mirrorless camera. Mirrorless camera have a less accurate autofocus system. So you have to understand this point. So autofocus system of mirrorless camera uses contrast detection rather than phase detection. So it cannot measure the distance between the lens and the subject as accurately as a DSLR can. So you need to understand this, that autofocus system is really developed, really, we can say that mature in a DSLR device. It can accurately calculate the distance between the subject and the lens. So, and mirrorless camera, they are working in different technology. So it's a contrast detection, and they really rely on good lighting, I should say. So something if it's they are not we can say that the technology what they have for the contrast detection, it's not equipped enough, or it's not developed that way that it can detect the distance accurately compared to DSLR. So that's why DSLR leading in the market. So it's still DSLR in front, and let's see in the future how it will happen. So now we'll understand the exposure triangle. So exposure triangle is the term anytime we want to learn photography skills and we talk about camera settings. So exposure triangle always come into our mind. So exposure triangle, when we say triangle, it means some three components we are talking about. So in the field of photography, it's a aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. So these three, camera and lens control, work together to regulate the amount of light that makes it to the camera sensor. Aperture and shutter speed, they regulate the light, how it is reaching the sensor. With the aperture and shutter speed, you can control that flow. And the sensitivity of camera sensor is controlled by ISO, because you must have heard that we can raise ISO and it will allow more light. So you can see the diagram here. If you raise ISO, it's showing the brighter part. So it's making the image brighter. And if you see that shutter speed, if you lower the shutter speed, image will be brighter. So if you make the shutter speed high, the image will be less brighter. It will stop the light. And in terms of aperture, if you see the f number, if it's small, we call it as a large aperture. So the small f number will give you more light, the image will be brighter. If you're on the high f number, f22 like this, so small will be whole, it's blocking the light, stopping the light, allowing less light to reach the sensor, its image will be darker. So you need to have good light condition to work with the small aperture. Shutter speed, we'll just try to understand the shutter speed definition here. Shutter speed is the length of time that the camera shutter remain open. and allow light to reach the sensor. Most of the photographers call this as exposure time, because it's exposure which is being calculated or being captured, and the how long that exposure being captured. So we call this as exposure time. So 1/4000 to 1/2000. It's a very high shutter speed. Now we have some professional device which supports 1/8000 also to freeze the fast moving objects. 1/250 to 1/60, these shutter speed we call as for good for journal photos. Even someone walking slowly, gently, you can capture with 1/250. 1/2 to 1/30, consider this long exposure to capture motion blur in consistent movement. So when we say consistent movement, it means we can say the element or we can say subject, it's doing movements, or like the waterfall, like a wheel, they are doing consistent movement. So you can work within the shutter speeds 1/2 to 1/30, and you can create different creative effects. Most of the time, when I capture waterfall, I'll have a shutter speed somewhere around 1/6, 1/8. That works for me. But this all depends the light condition. 2 to 10 seconds. So this considered to be the long exposure to paint with the light. So whenever I do light painting, I used to work within that shutter speed. Stars, capturing stars, you need a high shutter speed. And fireworks, in firework days, during festival, you can use the long shutter speed and long exposure, and you will see the creative trail effects from the fireworks. And we can also make the river water of the river like a glass. So if you are going to the river, you can we can say the evening time when the light is almost gone, you can check the shutter speed, and you'll be surprised how the image will come on the long exposure. Now we'll see that just example here for fast shutter speed. If you see that fast shutter speed, it's freezing the moment. So the person walking, it just freeze that moment. Everything look quite static. On slow shutter speed, it's just blurring the motion. So anything in motion will be blurred. Shutter speed control button on the camera, it'll be it is from Nikon, so you can see the button like this. And when we have on S, it's a shutter priority mode. Shutter speed values would be somewhere between 30 seconds. You can see the single digit, it's 30 seconds to 1/4000. So, but some devices supports 1/8000 also. But whenever we do a change from one to others, we can say that step or the shutter speed, we call this as a one-step change. So anything one step, if you are increasing shutter speed one step, we can say half the amount of light coming to the sensor. If you are going below, if you are we can say reducing the shutter speed, going to the long exposure, it'll double the amount of light coming to the sensor. So that's how it works. That's the concept. Handheld shutter speed. So the rule of thumb states that when shooting handhelds, use shutter speeds equal or faster than the one divided by your focal length. So whatever the focal length of lens you're using, you can calculate what would be the handheld shutter speed. Like for 300 mm, it'll be 1/300, but there is no shutter speed of 300. It'll be 1/320. So that is something where you don't have VR, vibration reduction, or image stabilization feature is not there. But if you have a stabilization, vibration reduction feature available in the camera, in the lens, then you may have the option to go even lower, 1 or 2 stop lower shutter speed, and you can still manage with the handheld. But just for example, for 50 mm, it'll be 1/50, but there is no shutter speed of 1/50. So we have something equal or faster. So 1/60 shutter speed will go for. But I'm just reminding you, it's a shutter speed we need without VR function, without vibration reduction and image stabilization. But if you have image stabilization, you can manage with the even lower shutter speed. Yeah.
How do I know what focal length I am using? Is it same as the aperture?
Focal length is written on the lens.
Right. It's
18. If you can you see this? There are some numbers on the lens.
Yeah. 18 to 55 is the numbers I have.
So these are focal length only. 18 to 55 is the focal length.
Right. So whenever I zoom in or zoom out, I guess the number changes from 18
Yes,
to.
yes.
So at any
That,
point of time, what would be my focal length?
so
Is it,
if you are in the middle, you need to see what is the focal length. You can capture image, you can see the overview data in the image, and you
oh,
will see the what was the focal length it was in the image
okay.
for the accurate focal length calculation. But you can always assume that if you are having 18 to 55, you can be on always 1/60 shutter speed. You no need to worry about. So anytime you will be on the higher shutter speed.
Okay. Okay. Got it. I think I got
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this is DSLR handheld techniques. So you can see the images here. These are the examples that how we should hold the DSLR device. So the knee bend technique, it means we are using our knee as a platform to hold the DSLR device, and we need something to make our we can say posture more stable. So when we have stable posture, there will be less prone. That will be less prone to shake, and we have more probability to get sharp images. The elbow plant, again, it's the concept we are planting our elbow on some hard surface. Any object you find which is giving you opportunity to plant the elbow, you can use that for that technique. The T-Rex is the traditional method of holding. So just for example, if I'm holding the camera like this on my hand, so I should make my left hand as a platform to hold it. I can make my front finger and the thumb free so I can move the focusing ring. If you are working with manual focus, you can use the front finger and thumb to move the focusing ring. This is a traditional method of holding, but you have to make sure that your elbow is always stick to your body. So the more stick, the more near to the body, it will be more stability you will have. And torch strap, it's something new. So we can, if you have a strap on your device, you can just wear it. And if you stretch it, it'll create some tension on the strap. It'll make sure it'll be less shaky. So these are the techniques you can use, how you can utilize, and you will see that your photography will definitely improve. Now we'll talk about aperture. So definition of the aperture is the aperture f-stop controls the amount of light reaching the sensor through the lens. So it's sometimes we see this as the eye of the lens. The aperture size will regulate the depth of field. So just for example, if you are working with low aperture like f1.4 arrow, something around like 1.8 also, it will create a bokeh effect and good for low light. Bokeh effect is something when some lights behind in the background, they are creating round circles. We call that as a bokeh. So in low light, good low light condition, when there are some artificial lights in the background, and they'll give more effect compared to some natural lights. You can get it in the natural environment too. Depends how the background have shiny objects behind. And f2.2 to f5.6, so it's good for portrait photography and sports photography. So they consider to have enough depth of field. It'll allow you to capture the whole subject. And even on the portrait, it'll make sure that your portrait face is in good focus. So for thumb rule for portrait, we advise to have f5.6. So f5.6 anyhow almost on every lens, it will make sure that you will have minimum 6 inches of depth of field. So it will make sure if you're focusing on the eye. So anytime you are taking photo of a living subject, we should take a focus from the eye. It will make sure something in front, having in good focus like nose, and something behind like ear should it'll be in good focus. So that's how we make sure that portrait is coming good. And f8 to f16 good for landscape to get increased depth of field. So whenever we talk about landscape, it means we want everything to be enough visible. We can identify what is inside in the each corner of the landscape. So f8 to f16 is recommended for the landscape photography. f16 to f32 good for long exposure and create starburst effect. With small focal length. So if you have some lens around 55, like you said, you have 18 mm, 18 to 55 mm, you can test it. You can set the aperture to f16 and night condition, find some street lights and test it out. You will see with f16 and exposure with the long exposure like 2 seconds, 3 seconds, you will see that the more it will be some point that you will see the starburst effect coming from the light. Now we'll just have a little more study on the depth of field. So what is depth of field? The distance in front or behind. The focus point that appears to be in the focus is referred to as depth of field. So just for example, if we are having a focus right in the middle, something in front, something in behind will be in focus. So that's in total we call as a depth of field. So just to remember these terms, large f number is small aperture. So people sometimes get confused. So I just make this slide very clear. Small f number is large aperture. So when we say small aperture, it means the hole in the camera. This is the aperture and the camera and in the lens, and this is very small. The hole is very small, so it means is on small aperture. When it will happen when we are using high f number. So large f number you are using at an increased depth of field. So you can see the image and everything looking in focus from front to back, everything looks to be in good focus. But when we are in large aperture, the hole will be quite bigger, eye will be quite bigger, it will allow more light, but at the cost of depth of field will be reduced. You can see if we focus in the middle, some boxes in front, some boxes behind are out of focus. Sometimes we use this as for creative purpose, just to make more artistic image. But this is how we should be aware that what we are trying to achieve with the aperture. Okay, now let's talk about aperture values. For dial button on the camera, it's an image from Nikon. And when we switch to A mode, it's aperture priority. So that when we are in aperture priority, we can just work with the aperture numbers only. So aperture numbers will be like this, as low as 1.4, as high as f32. So we can categorize these numbers in different, we can say the category of aperture. Like when we are on f1.4, it's very large aperture. When we are at f2.8, it's considered to be large. And when we are in the middle, somewhere around f5.6, it's considered to be medium aperture. f11, we call this as a small aperture. f22 is really very small aperture. f32. But again, whenever we are making any change in the setting in the aperture, we call this change as one step. So as we discussed in the shutter speed, the same way aperture, if you are increasing shutter speed by one step, we are changing from 5.6 to f8. It means it's half, it's making this light half, which is reaching the sensor, stopping the light. But when we are reducing the f number, it'll allow double amount of light reaching the sensor. So it increases the brightness on your image. So whenever you are struggling with the image, either you can lower the shutter speed or you can lower the f number. So whenever we make a selection of lower f number, it'll make the image lighter, but at the cost of small depth of field. When we make bigger f number, it will allow a lot of good enough depth of field, large depth of field, but it'll make the image darker. ISO sensitivity. So is a measure of the camera's ability to capture light. So it's a mechanism in the camera which allows to sense the light. Digital camera converts the light that falls on the image sensor into electrical signals for processing. So when light falls on the image sensor, it converts into the electrical signals for processing, and that's how the image getting recorded on the sensor. ISO sensitivity is raised by amplifying the signal. In other words, if ISO sensitivity is raised from 100 to 200, if you don't change the aperture, you will see that you are getting double shutter speed. So that's how you can take benefit of ISO. So when you are struggling with the shutter speed, you can raise the ISO and see that shutter speed getting improved. If you can avoid camera blur. So like as I said, you should have at least handheld shutter speed. So somewhere around the focal length, you should have the shutter speed. So you can get it by raising the ISO. And that's why the people say that ISO sensitivity should be raised if the lighting is poor. So just go for the higher ISO when there is not enough light. No light, low light flash photography. When lighting is poor, you can use a flash to light the portrait. You can see the image below. So image on the left is taken with the flash. Flash always have limited range. So there is nothing like that. If anything far can be captured using flash, nothing like that. So all flash have their range. The subject should be within that range to get, we can say, completely lit up by the flash. So you can see the image on the left. You can see the subject is quite good light having on that, but the ambient in the background, it's dark. So that's the limitation with the flash. But if you see image on the right, it's captured without flash, but with high ISO sensitivity. You can see almost all the ambient light got captured. So that's how you can take benefit of high ISO. If you are looking to capture ambient light, you can rely on the ISO. Noise at high ISO. So if you raise ISO, that will introduce some kind of grainy effect in your image. So make sure when you are raising ISO, you are raising enough that you will not degrade the image quality. Always test the ISO by taking same subject photo at different ISO level in the same light condition, and you will see that what is your device capability. Most of the time it's around low light condition. You can test it and you can see that at what point the grainy effect is. We can say that enough that making your photo unusable. It's too much in the image. You can just find a sweet spot for the ISO, so that what is the good value for your device, for the lens, and you can always stick around that to get better quality of images. So the raising ISO sensitivity can introduce a type of image artifact known as noise. We call that grainy effect as a noise. And making it semi-grainy, raising ISO sensitivity amplifies the electrical signals, which also amplifies any noise in the signals. As a result, the higher ISO sensitivity, the more obvious the effects of noise on your photographs. That's the same is true for all digital cameras. So all digital cameras use, it applies to all digital cameras, this, you can say the theory. We recommend that you raise ISO sensitivity only as high as needed to avoid blur. So always just keep this as we can say a note, something to remember. Always you can just raise the ISO, but just raise enough which you need to avoid camera blur. So you will get good shutter speed. Just stop. Do not raise further. You may get better, or we can say that further enhanced exposure, but at the cost of noise. So you will see a lot of noise. So try to avoid that. In this image, you can see the 12,800 having a lot of grainy effect, but on the ISO 100, it's quite clean image. ISO sensitivity can be set manually by the photographer or automatically by the camera. You have option to set the ISO on the auto. Most of the time we work with auto ISO when we are doing bird photography or street photography, where we can't really go back to the settings almost every time and see that how this we can see the exposure coming. So we can work with the auto ISO just to make sure that we are getting good exposure almost all the time. And even sometimes the green image coming, we can manage with that by converting into black and white. Now we'll just see the camera simulator. So we have understood the three aspects or the components of exposure triangle. Now we'll just try to do in a practical kind of. So you can do the same on your device. Let's do this on the this website. This is a simulator website where we have option of testing all these modes, shooting modes, shutter priority, aperture priority, and manual. So if you see that we are in the shutter priority mode, and the only settings we can change is shutter speed. This is the component we can change here. So if you see, whenever I'm changing the shutter speed, it's adjusting the aperture. It's not doing any change in the ISO. It's just adjusting the aperture, The higher shutter speed, it's making the aperture lower f number. But if I raise the ISO, you can see the effect on the aperture. It's allowing me to get the desired aperture. And that's what we can in aperture priority. If in the aperture priority, I can only change the aperture, and it's just changing that counter, the shutter speed, just to make sure the exposure will be optimal. You can see the effect on the image. So let's change that ISO. So if I raise the ISO, you can see that how it's impacting the shutter speed. So just for example, if you are working in a light condition, which is not good, you are just, for example, if I'm just on f16, but I want a good shutter speed. So what I can do, I can raise the shutter speed, I can raise the ISO, and you can see it's allowing me to have ISO shutter speed of 1/60 when I'm using ISO 200. If I'm on ISO 50, its shutter speed is 1/15. It's quite low. That's how you can work with the ISO, even in the shutter priority or aperture priority. But when we are in manual, we have control on all the aspects, all the three aspects we have in our control. So we can make any combination of settings. So it's not making change in other aspects. So all we have to manage to create good combination, and it's up to us how we want the creative results from our image in a manual mode. I always advise to take a test photo, record shot, something like that with the P mode, and see what are the camera settings are coming in the P mode. Just feed in the same settings in the manual mode, and you will see the same amazing result is coming. That's how you get confidence of working in manual mode. Now we are in composition techniques. So today's composition technique is line and spot. So what is line and spot? It's a kind of symmetric composition technique where we are dividing our frame, our image in the middle with a line, and you can see that it's identical in the both sides. So it's a kind of creating an image with a mirror effect. You can see that we have draw a line, and we can identify the points which are quite identical on the point on the other side of the line. So that's what we can achieve with this. Most of the time, the reflection photography, we do this, we apply these composition techniques, line and symmetry. But sometimes you can find the same in a different we can say that genre of photography, and even the different subjects you can identify. We'll see a lot of examples in coming slides. Line and point. So this is just one example of my glass photography. You can see the symmetrical framing. It's a shapes and the subject, very minimal composition. So if you draw a line in middle, you can identify the points. So that's how we use this line and point composition technique. This is architecture. So I found this architecture as a good example of a line and point. It's a shape and subject again. It's a minimal composition, and framing is symmetrical. You can see that it's like how we are matching the things on the both sides. This is the image I captured in a fun fair, and I found this as a good example. It's a motion effect. Again, it's a shape and subject, symmetrical framing. So every time you divide a frame with a line in the middle, you can see that some points they are quite, we can say, the mirror effect you can see in the image. This is from light painting photography workshop. So anytime you see image or anytime you create image which is having line and point or symmetric framing, you will see they have, we can say, enhanced visual impact on the viewer. They'll look more amazing because we are applying some composition techniques there. In nature, it's very easy to find out. You can see how identical it is. Like you can apply this with any flower and you'll find that they are quite symmetrical. That's the nature. I captured this during my nature photography workshop, and it was really unique, and it was really perfect example of symmetrical, how that leaf having pointers around it. And you can count it. So 4 there, 4 here, and it's just a perfect example of symmetrical framing. That's it what we have. So I'm having my special photo work and online course in the month of April. If you are in Pune, you like to join me, you can join my outdoor session. It's on 8th April. And I have the same basic photography introduction workshop. If you think that you can work on yourself, you can have some question to be discussed in the next session, you can just do some practice and all. I prepare some questions for the next workshop. You can join again. So it's a free entry for both, and anytime you can join. I have my session, one for the morning, one for the evening. So which time suits you, you can join that. So you can take benefit of it. Outdoor photography workshop. I'm doing outdoor photography workshop on birds, street and nature. So they are already scheduled for the coming week. I have birds photography workshop on 18th March. On 25th, I have street photography workshop. On 15th April, I have nature photography workshop. So all are scheduled, and you can find the registration link on my website. You can register there under workshops. I designed a special online workshop. So it's a kind of a dreaming content what I've done. So it's a 4-hour workshop all about photography. So the aim for this workshop is just to make sure even the beginners, if they have camera bought yesterday, they can join. And or if someone is looking to find the right way in the photography field, it's having enough information. It'll let you know that which device, which equipment you should buy to develop your skills, and what could be the genre of photography you want to pursue, and which lens is good for which kind of photography. All kind of these questions are covered. You can just refer the details in the registration link, and I've mentioned all the points what I'm going to discuss. I'm covering the portrait, I'm covering the landscape. So almost all kind of topics I've included, how we can control the light and all in the studio, in the natural. So everything I covered there. So if you like to join, you want to develop your skills in the photography, it's perfect for beginners and above. Again, I have 2 sessions, one for the morning, one for the evening. So which time suits you, you can join in. Depends on your location. If you're in a country where the time suits you for the evening, you can join in, or else you can join in the morning session. Photo editing online workshop. I have photo editing online workshop for Lightroom and Photoshop. These are the tools I'm using for my workflow for post-production. And these are really the tools which helps me to give a final touch on my images. So again, it's a 4-hour workshop for both. It's on 26th of March. You can join in. Well, for Lightroom, it's morning session. For Photoshop, it's evening session. Again, it's a beginners and above. So no need to think about that. If you are really having skills to use those softwares, anyone can start from the day one. I have a link to download the trial softwares from the registration link. There is a link to download trial softwares. You can download. You can use it for free for limited period of time, and you can take a benefit of, and you'll see that how it's helping you to improve the quality. Advanced photography workshop. I have a couple of advanced photography workshop where one online session is for glassware photography, where I'm sharing all the experience, knowledge, what I've done in the terms of glass photography. You can see my portfolio, what kind of work I've done. I'm going to illustrate. I'm going to explain all the previous works, how I created those images, and what are the basics to capture reflection. and I have to avoid the reflection on the shiny elements, subjects. So we'll learn all that. It's a 4-hour workshop on 16th April. It'll be online session. Again, beginners and above can join. For light painting photography, it's on May 20th. So previously I've done that workshop on Metal Tikri in Pune. And I was really amazed the results what I got at that location. It's perfect for light painting. And again, beginners and above can join. So no need to have any previous experience for similar kind of photography. Portfolio building events. I am having 2 portfolio building events right now. The one for portrait, I'm still working on the content. So soon it will be published. But for product and for food photography, I have these workshop for 29th and 30th April. So aim for these workshop is just to give you enough images you can build your portfolio on the product or food photography. So I'm going to give you opportunity to create images, professional like photos from these workshops. This will be full day workshop in a photo studio setup. It'll be in Pune. So if you have any question, any concern, any point which you want to discuss, you can directly contact me, and we can really work it out. So whatever the points you have, we can work it out. Now, thank you so much for your participation. Now we are in the Q&A session. You can always send me queries on my email address, info@sumitphotoworld.com. I'm going to stop the screen share and I'll be available here for your questions. So if you have questions prepared, we can discuss. And I'll just stop this session only when you say that you have no questions, and everything will be good. I'll also share the feedback link.
So I have 2 questions.
Yep.
One is regarding street photography. I saw that one of your workshops was about it.
Your name. Could you just type in your name in the chat and the question? So it'll be good for me, so because I have to prepare some presentation kind of for all these questions. So it'll help someone else referring those.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Okay, how's the legal the scenes recording street photography? Yeah, that's the aim of my street photography workshop. I'll give you enough knowledge, enough background that you'll be comfortable with your camera on the street. Even I was having online workshop also for the street photography, where it was only for the content. And if you want, I can reintroduce that session for street photography. But in outdoor street photography workshop, I start my workshop with the camera settings, with all these general questions on street photography, because when people coming for the first time, they also get quite feel awkward, feel scary that how it will be. But my main aim is that I'll make you comfortable with your camera in your hand, and I'll tell you how we approach the subject, how we'll find the scene, how we'll capture, how we'll create our compositions, all things I covered during the workshop. So it's a 5 hours workshop. I'll make sure you will be more than confident when you leave that workshop. You will be enough confident. You can just ask your friend to join you, and you can come anytime on the street with the camera. There are some, yeah.
More than the confidence part, like isn't it a violation of privacy if you are taking pictures and people are?
There are. Yes. So there are some rules, like anything on the street is in the boundary of not within the privacy. If someone need privacy, they need to be in their own compound. So anything on the street, it's very much legal. You can capture, but you have to be on the street. It's not like that you are on the street and you are capturing someone inside their compound, somewhere in, like someone in the hotel room. If they are on the window, you can capture them from the street and it's totally legal. But if you are you are using some ways to take a photo inside the hotel room. So
Okay.
that's some kind of you are breaching the privacy. Anything on this from the street while standing on the street, the view you can capture, that's totally legal. What mode do you recommend for beginner coming from auto mode? Shutter priority or versus aperture priority? Yeah, again, so it's our need for the photo. So if your priority is shutter speed, so it means you need to have a shutter speed. You can't compromise on that. Then that's why we say this as a shutter priority. When we say priority, it means we are having priority on the shutter speed. We can't compromise. We can compromise on aperture, but we can't compromise on shutter speed. That's a shutter priority. And when you want aperture to be, we can say that you have decided that you are not going to change aperture. That will be aperture priority. So you'll set the aperture. You can manage with the shutter speed. You can take a help from ISO. You can raise ISO to get better shutter speed. But again, when you are in aperture priority in good light condition, you don't need to worry about shutter speed. So you will always get good high shutter speed when you are in good light condition. But when you are in low light condition, you may struggle. You may see that when you are in aperture priority in low light condition, shutter speed is going really low. You can take a help from tripod, or you have to have some ISO help to raise the shutter speed. So that's it. So it's up to you that how you want. But I always recommend to take a record shot with the P mode. Whenever you are going out in any light condition, take a shot of P mode. P mode is something, it is creating a combination of shutter speed and aperture.
Right.
So when you get that combination, keep it very simple. Like you go to shutter speed of 1/250 and aperture you go somewhere around 5.6. So any stop. So what we have understood in the simulator, if you do stop, if you change the shutter speed, if you increase shutter speed, it'll lower the F number. And if you decrease the shutter speed, it'll make the aperture higher. It'll go in the high F number. So that's what you have to do manually right on the device, because you know the concept, one step above and one step down. So you know, if you are allowing more light with the shutter speed, by making the shutter speed lower, you have to stop the light making aperture little on the high number. So that's how you make the combinations. And it's quite funny. It's quite an enjoyable experience when you do it first time, and you will be amazed at how the results are coming.
Yeah, I am kind of sad about the results that are coming.
Yeah, but because you don't know there's the small bit of information missing, we struggle. We get sometimes really irritated, frustrated, and we just miss the basics. That's what happened actually.
I understood. I was asking this question because auto mode, obviously, or the P mode is the easiest to go with for a beginner because there is nothing to do.
Yeah,
So
but
I assumed that one of these modes, like shutter priority or aperture, might be the easier out of the two. And
yes. P mode is something where we most of the time use P mode to capture record shots to assess the light, how the light it is. Shutter priority we are going, it means you are serious enough to create a shot. We are serious enough to create a frame. Then we go to shutter priority or aperture priority. But in P mode, you don't have any control. It's a camera deciding what is the better combination.
Understood.
But camera don't know better combination. Only photographer knows what would be the right combination.
Well, yeah, thank you. I do not have any other questions.
Which would be the best camera for beginners? So for best camera for beginners, it all depends on your budget. It's a question from Kaushal. Kaushal, there is no concept of best camera for beginners. Entry-level camera, we say that entry-level camera. It's all depend on your budget. That if you have a budget for entry-level camera, you can find different reviews, compare that features what each devices have. So I never make things complicated. I make things easy. Just find out what are the devices in your budget and compare their features, even with the different manufacturers. If you don't have any priority for a specific manufacturer, you can compare the entry level device from different manufacturers, check their features, what they have, and you can decide for one of them. But there is no concept of something like that best camera for beginners. Entry level camera we have because they are designed for beginners. That's why we call them entry level devices. So as per your budget, you can decide, you can check different, we can say that YouTube tutorials available for different comparing devices, the features you can know better. And based on that, you can devise the better feature you will see, like controlling ISO and all. So if you see that device is supporting enough feature and the same budget, you can decide for that. I hope I gave answer. If you have any other on top of it, you can ask.
I'm done.
Question? Okay, he also got the answer. That's cool. Okay, if there is no question and if you still find some questions later on, you can always send me email on my email address info@sumithphotoworld.com. I'm waiting for your feedback. If you want me to do some changes in the content, or you have some special suggestion, or what you feel about this session, because this is kind of introduction session. I'm not covering all the things because for that I have my dedicated workshop all about photography, where I'm covering end to end all about photography. But this is just having enough information. It will make you comfortable with the camera settings. That's the aim of this online session. I hope I'm achieving, and if you feel more confident after this session, then I'll feel good about it. Okay, I just wait for 1 more minute. If there is no question, we'll just conclude the session for today. And really, thank you so much for joining. And I hope I was clear enough. My information was useful enough, and you'll be having more fun time with the camera in the future.